So let's start with this speed versus patience. How do you know whether a decision requires speed or requires someone slowing down?
Well, I would look at a decision and determine whether or not your decision is reversible, right?
Mm,
First thing I would look at, because if once you make the decision, whatever it is, if you can't reverse it, that's not a decision I'd want to make fast. So that's one. You need to look at the importance of the decision. What's
hmm
obviously something that's incredibly important. You want to spend more time evaluating that decision versus making that decision rashly. And then what's the sensitivity from a time perspective of the decision that needs to be made. And if you're looking at a decision that needs to be made quickly, then you have to make the decision fast. Uh,
hmm
Again, those are the three I would say primary things is just, can I reverse this decision?
Yeah.
And if you can, then, then you have the time to be able to actually, weigh what you're doing and what the outcome could be, based on the circumstances and make a caution decision. But, if you can't reverse it, you know, then you have to take the time and if you can, you want to take more time. So I would look at, is the decision reversible?
hmm
What's at stake? How important is the decision? And how sensitive is the decision in terms of whatever you're trying to decide upon? How sensitive is the need to make that decision to impact whatever it is you need to impact?
I, yeah, way to start strong because the first thing I heard in that is consequences.
Yeah, yeah,
And consequences and timing are two of the most biggest and important deciding factors in how to be able to speed up, slow down, and make decisions that will alter not just how things look internally, but especially externally when
yeah,
it comes to the perception of a business and how people view you in general. So, yeah, one of the things that I was thinking about as you were saying that is speed is right when you can pivot
yeah,
and you can kind of reverse it if you need to. You put a Band-Aid on what you need to be able to put a Band-Aid on. You slow down when there are consequences that you know that you can't turn around and correct. And timing shows up as what do you have at stake?
right.
Because if the stakes are high, then chances are you need to slow down and at least give it a second and a third thought to make sure that whatever the consequences are, there's something that you can live with.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so let's look at this from the operator's manual in action type of situation. So, planning was a theme across this series.
Mhm.
How does planning actually make execution faster instead of slower?
So with planning, the beauty of planning is, and I'll relate it to writing a business plan. What you're doing in the planning process is you're trying to think ahead of all the things that could potentially go wrong and come up with solutions for them, so that when you're in the midst of running your business and something happens, you can react instinctively because you've already thought that might occur and you
Yeah.
thought what you might do as a result of that occurring. So planning allows you to do is focus on the 5% that you can't plan for, right?
Yes.
Because you can't plan for everything. There's always going to be, so if you free up all that energy on looking at everything to, taking, and planning in advance all of 95% of what could happen and coming up with the alternatives for how you would react. That 5% that you can't plan for, your energy is focused on handling that stuff.
Yeah.
So versus the person who doesn't plan and now you have to devote all of your energy to everything that happens. So now you're devoting energy to 100% of everything because you haven't planned. So that again, when you're planning, and only having to react to a small percentage of what occurs to you on a daily basis, you can do things so much more efficiently. So and that
Yeah.
that that's what allows you to, and again, people will always they'll look at good business people, and good business people plan, right? And so they'll look at good business people and they say, "Yo, they make it look so easy." Well, they make it look so easy because they planned. Well,
Yes.
they tried to figure out what could happen. Let me come up with a plan A, plan B for
Mhm.
everything that could happen. I know I can't think of everything, but if I can think of 95% of the things
Yeah.
and free up my time to devote to the things that I haven't, that 5% that I haven't thought of, whenever I make a decision and it falls into that 95 percentile that I've planned through, I can deal with that effortlessly because, it's like, being an athlete and, taking 1,000 shots from a particular, position on the court.
Mhm.
You're building muscle memory in, and
Yeah.
planning is the equivalent, in a business. It's the planning, of taking that shot. Once you have to take that shot in real life, you can do it so effortlessly because you've practiced it over and over and over and over again, right? And the planning allows you to figure out what you're going to do, and again, it's like, okay, I understand when this happens, this is how I'll react, and so you react accordingly based on your planning. If A doesn't work, you have a plan B. You go to B. You do this very quickly. Someone looking at you from the outside looking in is like, "Oh my god," you know, "it looks so easy for this person."
Mhm.
Again, because they plan for it, right? So that's how it makes everything that you do move so much faster.
Absolutely. I'm thinking back to the media planning that used to be done. I remember working for Everyday Health,
Mhm.
and that was one of the roles that I had where the brand would reach out to the agencies would put out their feelers to be able to see who they wanted to be able to run with. And one of the things that we would do is we would listen to what the goals were, look at
Mhm.
who the audience is, plan out as much as you possibly can. And one of the things that really stood out to me from gaining that experience is there's a lot that you can plan for,
Right.
but what you're really planning for is the things that you can't plan for.
Yeah.
And once you can check the boxes of all the things that, like, okay, well, I know this could happen. I know this could happen. I know this could happen. It leaves room for you to be able to not have to react in real time, or at least the bandwidth to react in real time
Right.
for the things that you didn't think about.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
95% is trying to check every single box that you can.
Yeah.
And that role really, I mean, I had known about it before, but that was one of the times where I really got to be able to take notice and really put into practice the importance of preventative measures.
Yeah.
Preventative measures, planning is preventative measures.
Right.
It's the understanding that you can plan for everything to go right,
Yeah.
but life happens. And
Yeah.
things very rarely ever go exactly the way that you planned. So freeing yourself up to be able to deal with all of the things that didn't go as planned, the only way that you can really be able to do that is by planning.
Yeah.
You plan for what you know you can control and
Yeah.
leave room for everything else.
Yeah, and life and business are both complicated and complex, and so
Mhm.
when you're planning, what you can do is you can take something that's complex and you can create an execution roadmap, right? And so now with that execution roadmap, b- putting things into bite-sized chunks makes getting anything done so much easier, right? Because now it's easier to, when you break it down to these smaller steps to just go drop step through the individual steps and
Mhm.
accomplish what you need to accomplish. Now you've taken the complex and made it simple, right? So
Yeah.
all of that makes is what makes planning make everything else work so much faster.
True. True. I don't want to oversimplify it because I realize both of us probably have at least 30 years worth
Yeah,
of experience that we can reference. And I'm listening to what you're saying. I'm like, yeah, of course. There's an importance of understanding what the process is and learning the process because when you learn what the process is, then it teaches you how to be able to plan for what's supposed to take place in that process.
right.
That's where preventative measures come in. And
Mm,
that's the difference between preventative measures and reactionary solutions.
right.
When people are trying to figure out, okay, well, you guys are talking about planning, keep in mind that we're talking about looking at different iterations of the same thing over and over and over again to the point where we can anticipate, we can see things before they happen. We can see pretty far down the road. When you're just starting out, that first iteration is the thing that you're focusing on, and you want to document as much of that as possible. So when you see a different version of it, then that's when you can start to say, okay, well, I know what this looked like the last time. What's similar and what's different? And that's where you really start building out your plan. And
Right.
that's when you start to be able to build out your experience of how to navigate the process and the troubled waters, if you will, because it's not an if, it's a when. And when it does happen, you want to have something to be able to fall back on and say, you know what, I may not have been here before, but I've been in a place that was similar enough where I can reference some of that in order to be able to deal with the things that I'm looking at now.
Yeah.
So I would say planning removes feeling like you have to act in the moment and
Mhm.
having a reactionary solutions that could turn around and cost you because you didn't get a chance to think through the consequences. I think when things break, if you've done planning properly, you have the bandwidth to be able to address them.
Yeah.
And preparation buys you time. It
Right.
buys you choice. It
Right.
buys you decisions
Yeah. Yeah.
that you will turn around and be happy that you had the time to be able to think through, as opposed to saying, well, I'll deal with that when it comes up. I think we joked about this before, saying I'll cross that bridge when it gets here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you better hope that bridge is sturdy.
Yeah, yeah. And you talked about experience. I mean, we of course have the advantage of experience that we can whenever we're confronted with a situation based on the experience, we can, they say hindsight is 2020.
Yeah.
We can go back and okay, I saw this before.
Mhm.
I know what I did when I saw it. I know what the outcome was. If I didn't like the outcome, I can try something different. But just because you don't have the experience doesn't mean that that's where planning comes in. Now, if you don't have the experience, and even if you have the experience, planning helps you make even better decisions. But if you don't have the experience, planning gives you the equivalent as much as you can of experience.
Yes.
And that, again, you're looking at what could happen.
Mhm.
How would I react if this does happen? And, maybe give myself a plan B as well. And now when it does,
Ideally.
you've got a way of dealing with something. It's not as good as experience, but it's as close as you're gonna come to it.